Wow. I've never heard anything like that.
This is the second time you've said this to me, Silka.
I know.
Many.
Did you push record?
Thanks so much for joining us again on our second act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life. Hey, Silka.
Hi, Paige. Well, we are back with a follow-up segment to one of our emotional health videos that we did on processing the losses in your life and how those may be holding you back, keeping you stuck in certain situations, which was a big revelation to me. And you gave us homework in the last segment about identifying what those losses are. So what's the next step, Paige?
So, when you put together your timeline of loss, it can be very emotional, especially midlife, because you're starting to look at, oh my gosh, look at all of this loss that I have in my life, or it feels overwhelming that, oh my gosh, look at this loss. And you might think this is futile. I feel worse now. But you know what? You have to be able to identify where the themes are and how it's carried forward. So interestingly enough, what I have people do next is this. After you go through what's gone on in your childhood, you're actually going to write or type whatever you want to do. You're going to go back to your childhood, and whatever happened where the losses are, you're going to rewrite your story. And people might say, rewrite my story, but it freaking happened. Yes, but here's what you don't understand. Psychologically, we get into a loop and we keep the story, keep the story, keep the story going. If you go back and rewrite the story in a different way, it doesn't minimize or take away what happened because you're going to grow from it. But you can rewrite the story. For instance, I talked last time about how I was a stutterer, chronic stutterer. And I can remember being in third grade class, and I was called upon and I was stuttering, and a little boy in front of me was making such fun of me. And this is not like me, but I reached out and grabbed his hair and shook his head. And the teacher was like, Paige, what are you doing? Because I've never been like that before. And of course, I got sent out of the principal's office. So when I rewrote my story, how I rewrote it was that either two ways I rewrote it. I never was a stutterer. And what I found when I took away being a stutterer, it took away what I learned from it. So I said, no, that's not what I want. So I rewrote it again and I said, I was a stutterer. However, I was so confident that when they made fun of me, I knew that through my stuttering, I was gaining empowerment, that I was standing up in front of people and showing I'm not perfect, but look, I'm still here and I can still have friends and I can still do the work. And you would never know that I was a stutterer because I love to get up and do public speaking and motivate people. So it's really important. So when I rewrote the story, I said, you know what? I don't want to take my stuttering out. I'll keep my stuttering, but I changed how I felt as a child about the stuttering.
So it's literally going back and in hindsight,
Mhm.
capturing the learning experiences out of it.
Yes, and you're reframing your story in a different way. So the little child in you that went through this can go, well, how did you want it to go? And maybe if you did have a stuttering problem, you say, oh, I want to take my stuttering completely out. You can. But for me, I kept it in because that worked for me. So play with your story about, do I want to keep that in? Do I want to wipe that out altogether? Change how the child in you would respond and what the child would do, and the people and the adults around you, how they would support you and how the kids would support you. That changes the story, changes the framework, and starts to break up the pillar that's in your way.
Wow. I've never heard anything like that.
This is the second time you've said this to me, Silka.
I know. It's just, what a way of just dealing with stuff that you never think about. Maybe we can give one more example that would help people listening. What would be another good example? Like say,
So another good example is if you came from a household where you didn't get a lot of support, and maybe it was an abusive household or a violent household, you change the way things were. Maybe you still kept the same parents, but this time they were aware that they didn't want to act and be like their parents were. So they treated you differently and you had the support. Or maybe you said, you know what? Nope, I got pulled out of my house and I got put with new parents and it was a whole different experience. You're changing the dynamic of the violence or the abuse or whatever happened as to what your perspective was. And maybe you create different parents or same parents, but they treated you differently in a more supportive way. And someone might say, oh, well, you're rewriting my life. No, you're rewriting your life as to what works for you. You can do and rewrite your story any way you want in a way that makes you feel more positive, that story doesn't become your current adult life, that story can be shifted and changed. And a weird thing goes on when you write your story. You might cry, you might get really upset, and then halfway, 3/4 of the way through, you kind of go, oh my God, something's happening. I'm feeling different. I don't want to cry as much. Something changes with that. Now, caveat of this is if you're in a difficult space in your life right now, I always urge you to do this with a professional if you'd like to have professional help, a life coach, a counselor, a therapist, whatever it might be. We're just giving different types of suggestions of how to reframe that story so you can stop the loss of the big pillar that was in front of you now.
Yeah, and obviously we're not talking about creating a fantasy land or
Right.
It's really about your perspective of what
Yeah.
you went through. I mean, you went through, it is what it is, but how we perceive things is what we can change, and
Yeah.
and just get in touch with the learning, the growth that would come out of that, as horrible as it may have been. I mean, I'm not the expert here, you are, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm hearing you say.
You can change anything you want about your story. I know that myself, when I've done it, when my clients have done it, they always think they're going to change everything until they start writing. And they go, you know what? I don't think I want to change this piece. I just want to reframe it and make it look different. How the adults treated me, how I treated myself, how my friends came in. So whatever you want to do to revamp your story so you can move forward today, see what works for you. Give it a try.
Well, it's great food for thought. We'll link to some more information, about all this. Obviously, to your information. Leave us your questions. This is I mean, I'm left with tons of questions right now. And like I said, Paige and I talk all the time. This is new information to me, and I find it fascinating. So do leave us your questions. Leave us your concerns, whatever. And Paige, we're coming to the end. Anything else you want to leave us with in this segment?
Yeah, just know that it's okay if you get emotional. It's okay if it doesn't feel that great, in the beginning. Change your story to how it works for you. Revamp it how it works for you. And if you need help while you're going through this, please find a therapist, find a counselor that can help you go through this process. But just know that the story is just a story, and you can decide what pieces you want to hold on to that made you who you are today and are the positive parts of you, and which pieces you'd like to shift and change and have a different perspective from.
Well, it's a terrific way to, create your second act.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we will see you on our next segment of Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching. For more information on living your life to the fullest after 50, please visit our website, secondact.tv. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Buttons are right over here. See you next time. Bye-bye.